What's up, everyone? Welcome to Join the Convo. We have a really special episode today. We're talking all things college football. In a year impacted by COVID-19 and the social justice movement, this college football season is going to be one like none other. So I've invited some of my really good friends to come on and have a discussion about the storylines leading into the season. A season that for much of this year was in doubt. I'd like to welcome these very good friends of mine, starting with Brent Stover. Brent Stover works for CBS Sports Network. He is the host of Inside College Football. Colin Peak was the former star tight end of the Alabama Crimson Tide. His team beat my Florida Gators in 2009 for the SEC championship. And Dapo Ajayi. Dapo is an avid college football fan and a very good friend of mine. Welcome to the show, everybody.
Thank you.
So let's go ahead and jump right in. First of all, today the Big Ten announced that they are going to be playing football in the fall. It's something that we all knew was coming, but the announcement is official, so they'll be playing on October 24th. And we can assume that the Pac-12 is going to follow in their footsteps, which means all major 5 conferences will be playing college football in the fall. So that's a good start. But earlier in the year, things were a little bit rocky. So Brent, I want to start with you. Back between March and June, when the season was kind of up in the air, what were networks like CBS thinking at the time? What could they do to replace such a big moneymaker, college football? What would they have done to make up that revenue shortage?
Well, I think speaking for CBS or for any of the major television networks that carry national sports and college football in particular, you go into maybe a little bit of a scramble mode. Luckily, things are put in place to where, if scheduling changes must be made, that you're able to, show recordings from the past, best of classic games, things like that. I think you saw that throughout the summer with CBS and CBS Sports Network carrying NFL games, playoff games, Super Bowls from years past. But at the end of the day, when you lose March Madness, then you start saying, all right, we might be able to get okay. We're okay here, but by the time the fall rolls around, you need college football. You need the NFL. And I think all along we felt like, the NFL was going to get played come heck or high water. But college football was not nearly a guarantee. And we've seen the first couple of weeks that it's a bit of a rocky start. But yeah, with the Big Ten playing, that's obviously a big deal for every television network, particularly the partners of the Big Ten Conference, of course.
Agreed. And we know that college football is important not just to the networks, but also to the fans and also the community. So Colin and Dapo, I want to turn it to you. What would the impact have been if we didn't have a college football season on the community, the schools, the players? What would have happened? Colin, we'll start with you.
First and foremost, I think, college football is a little bit bigger than what people expect it to be, right? Most of us look at it, we think it's a game. It's absolutely more than a game for a lot of these college towns, right? It's a revenue driver. It's how people make their life. And it's truly the lifeblood of a lot of people there. I think, speaking of Alabama alone, and the number, it's give or take a little bit, but what I heard was the impact of a college football season not taking place in full form this year. It's going to cost, I think, the university around $80 million. And if you think of that university, and we all forget, like schools are, most of them, some of them are private businesses, right? I think it just creates a very unique situation where for the first time, people start realizing that, first of all, there's a major hit to what they expect. I know that many people probably go to Alabama expecting first a national championship, so roll tide, and then second to be able to be in the stands because part of the college experience, and especially I know Dapo and you, Fred, Florida. Part of the reason why you go to Florida is to be able to go to college football games. It's it's not only a huge social activity for everyone, but once again, it's a huge revenue maker. So I think. You take college football away from these communities and all of a sudden, it's the small businesses, it's the restaurants, it's the people who maybe have made a living just working as a janitor at college football games, right? Mm-hmm. Or parking. It's, there's an entire ecosystem that revolves around college football. And it's really funny that like we sit here and we say like, oh, college football might not get played. It's just a game. But for so many more people, it's not a game. And I can speak from Alabama. for example, that there's no NFL teams, there's no MLB teams, and there's no NBA teams. You know, the University of Alabama is the biggest attraction year round. People plan their entire, you know, year around those. So for it to all of a sudden disappear, I think not only does it leave a big gap in the pockets of a lot of people monetarily, but it leaves a big gap in people's heart to all of a sudden feel like life that they've known it has changed. But Dapo, you know, you tell me, what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I mean, to kind of touch on some of the points you made, the void of what college football has meant in my life is present even with the games being played. I mean, Fred, probably the last 5 times that I've seen you has revolved around a live Gator event.
I mean,
right? So
that's no lie. It was all last season.
right. Once we get a sniff of being remotely good, I know I'm going to see Fred like 5 or 6 times that year.
Yeah, I mean, it was basically week to week to week. We're like, all right, we can't really be going to this game too, can we?
Right. And so, you know, with no live attendance, selfishly for me, I'm not going to see a lot of the friends that, you know, I love and I would like to see every year. And then like what Colin was talking about, even on a microeconomic level, the ticket scalper that I got tickets from for the last 20 seasons, what's he going to do? You know? So
yeah.
I definitely think there's an impact beyond just the final score and the competition on the field with college football running even at the, you know, the level that it's running now with no fans or very limited fans.
And let's stay on that game to game point, right? And let's talk a little bit about the season. So we know that the Big Ten's playing, Pac-12's playing, ACC's playing, SEC's playing, and the Big 12's playing, right? So the Power 5 conferences are all in. But each team, each conference's schedules look a little different, right? So we think, assuming that the season plays out throughout the rest of the fall, that we will have a national champion at the end of the season. But what do we think the integrity is of that national champion? Are they going to have an asterisk next to their name? Or do we really think we're going to crown them as the national champion of 2020? Go ahead, Dapo. I see you smiling.
Yeah, so, you know, I think, yes, that there's going to be an asterisk next to the championship of this game just because of the very limited or none of the interleague play.
So hold on, Dapo. I got to pause. So let's say our Gators win, right? And there's an asterisk. Are you going to – let's say the Gators win, right? And 10 years from now, our UGA fans are like, yeah, but that 2020 championship didn't count. Are you going to count it?
Oh, no. Of course it counts. I'm just saying there was inconsistency going into the regular season. Sure.
Okay.
You know what would solve that, though?
What?
If we could somehow have an extended playoff. So a lot of the questions
what do you mean by that, Dapo?
Were on the field where we have to play.
What do you mean by an extended playoff?
Like 8 teams. You know, if there was ever a year that there should be an 8 or, you know, dare I say 16 team playoff, it would be now.
Why is that?
Well, just because with all the uncertainty, you get to answer a lot more questions on the field. You get to, you know, instead of speculating if a 1-loss team here and a 1-loss team there, who would have been better and who deserves to make the top 4, they play for it. Mm-hmm. You know, in a year like this, I think, people are probably more open. We've all been forced to kind of accept changes and adapt more quickly. And so I think a drastic change like that, if there was ever a time for a one-off or an experiment for it to happen, it would be this year. And I think universally people would love it.
I mean, we talked about this when we talked earlier, but, you know, to your point about being flexible, I've been a college football fan for 20 plus years, right? And there's only 2 instances where I've seen schedules really move, right? And had to be big events. One was 9/11, and then the other one was when University of Florida was dealing with a pending hurricane, and they didn't even make that decision until week of, right? But my impression of college football and the schedules was these things are set out 5-10 years in advance. They are immovable objects. And I think what we're seeing now is there's more wiggle room if we have alignment between the teams and the conference and even the NCAA. Things can happen. And so, Colin, I want to ask you, as a player, someone intimately involved in the program, What do you think about the integrity of a national champion? For example, if the Big Ten teams only play 7 games and the SEC teams play 10 games, and we're talking about 10 games in the SEC that are all SEC games. Usually we have some cupcakes thrown in there, but this is all SEC. What do you think about that as a player?
I mean, I think it's difficult. I think, even beforehand, let's say before the whole pandemic hit, I've always had a big issue. And I can tell you resounding from athletes who've played in the major conferences, those who do not play a conference championship game, we look down upon. Not for a negative thing in the fact that they're not as good as us, right? But it's just you didn't earn the right, almost like how Dom was talking about is, an 18 playoff, a 16 playoff. Well, that's sort of aligned already when you have a conference championship, right? Because you're forcing the 2 best teams in each conference to play each other. And then from there, sort of the winner emerges, and then they throw their hat into what is now the BCS sort of top 14, right? To see who can go in there and do that. I think when all of a sudden, let's take the caveat out of this, which is college football is a game of attrition. Why the best teams succeed, why Alabama succeeds, is not only because they have Nick Saban, so shout out to the Godfather, but also the fact that you got blue chippers behind blue chippers who have to be ready to step up and play. A testament on our team, we lost Dante Hightower, who tore his ACL that season. He's won multiple Super Bowls with the Patriots. And all of a sudden, when you lose that individual, you have to find a way to solve for that, right? And if you don't have players behind that, if you can't play this game of attrition and weather this entire season, which is in the SEC, it's an absolute gauntlet, right? Then you really don't deserve to play at the end. That's why having a 1 loss in the SEC is just like being an undefeated team in other conferences, because you have to play that. So now if you're saying the SEC has to now play every team or most teams on your side and the other side, yet the other conferences are going to play 7 games, you play 10. Now, the other side has, I think, a bit of fresher legs. It's like giving someone who doesn't have to play 4 quarters of a game, they only have to play 3, right? So, on my take of it is it's difficult if then you start holding those losses against an SEC team, right? So let's say, I remember one year when Alabama went to the national championship, we didn't even get to play in the SEC championship game. So then we played LSU in the national championship game and ended up beating them, right? So, those scenarios happen because of that. But, in my end, I think it's once, like Dabo said, it's a year for adaptability. It's a year for understanding that things don't always go as you intend, and you have to fight through those circumstances. But I absolutely agree that if it's a 10-game schedule versus a 7-game schedule, you then have to give some of that favoritism to a team who did play 10 games because they've proven more on the field. But I mean, Brent, you see this more than anyone. I mean, what is your take on this?
Well, for one thing, the Big Ten is going to aim for a 9-game schedule. And I realize that why you guys are throwing out 7 is because it's very realistic, because they have given themselves literally no window for mistakes, for weeks off because of COVID. And so I don't know how this whole thing is going to play off. By the same token, I don't know how it's going to play out with the SEC, because yes, there's 10 games on the schedule there, and there might be a little bit more leeway there, but not much more leeway. So they may not get to their 10 as well. So back to Dapo's point, I would like to, on a sidebar, say Dapo is literally the guy that I have to thank that we get to do what we do, talking college football and doing shows seriously, because that's when we talk about pageantry and fans and the cheerleaders on the sidelines and the bands. And I know it looks a little different this year. Dapo is the guy that we need. And so that's awesome. I want to give him credit for that. But the other piece, I would just say this. This is the wrong year. I said all those nice things about Dapo. This is the last possible year that you would try to do anything but your 14 playoff, because it's going to be a difficult job in any case trying to figure out who those playoff teams are. Because look at the Big Ten. If they're going to play 9 games, and the 9th being the title game, and then the 2 against the 2, the 3 against the 3, the 4 against the 4. So they're going to have that December 19th as a day when everybody plays against each other from each division. Yeah, which is going to be an awesome day.
That's interesting.
This could come out roses. Fred, this could come out roses for the Big Ten, because December 19th is going to be all their day, and then December 20th is the day that these are going to be selected. But if the Big Ten champion, to Colin's point, if the Big Ten champion was 5-0 or 6-0 because they couldn't get to all of their games, they couldn't get to 9 games because of COVID. And again, there is not, if you count out the weeks, there is not a single extra week there that you could play a game as a makeup date. So how do you look at it? If there's a team in the SEC that does get their 10 games in and they're 8-2, and the Big Ten champion is 5-0 or 6-0, what do? I think I'd like to believe in the credibility of the playoff committee that they will factor all of that in and not just say, okay, well, there's a 0 in the loss column. We have to get the Big Ten champion there. This could actually be a year where 3 teams out of the SEC come, or 2 teams out of the SEC, and then one of the 4 playoff teams is a Cincinnati or a UCF, one of those group of 5 teams. If there was ever a year for a group of 5 to get in, it would be that. So not to rain on Doppel's parade, but I think this is, with so much up in the air, I think this is going to be the last possible thing they could do is try to expand it.
So Brent, you bring up a great point with that December 19th day, right? So the Big Ten sounds like all teams will be playing on the December 19th, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that's happened before, right? So that's a cool concept. And I want to ask all of you, with such a special season, considering COVID and even some of the social justice issues and these major decisions that are being made, is there anything you guys see potentially sticking? And we haven't even seen everything yet, but from what we know so far, is there any long-term ramifications or ripple effects we see that'll flow into 2021, 2022, and into the future? We'll start with you, Dapo.
I think you're going to see some players opting out of entire seasons, realizing that, maybe I don't really need to play this year. Maybe I can hire a trainer if I'm a high draft prospect. I think you're going to see the opt-out stick on a collegiate level, especially.
What do you think that does for the game, Dapo? What do you think that does for the game? As a fan, how do you feel about that?
Oh, I hate it.
Yeah.
I hate it. I hate seeing all these players from LSU opt out. I hate seeing, this Ohio State kid who has already opted out, and now they're going to have a season, and he's kind of undecided what to do. I'd love to see the players on the field. I mean, it goes to, a much bigger issue of the NCAA and allowing these players to monetize themselves. But if the incentive isn't there, then, not playing for, financial reasons or for health reasons, is what you have to do, which is sad because it takes away, from the game.
Yeah. Well, Colin, what do you think? What do you think could be a long-term effect from this season?
I would have to lean into what Dapo is saying. And, you've seen, I know with Trevor Lawrence trying to create a union, right? Which was, athletes saying we want to play, let's organize to figure out what makes sense. I think more than ever, the NCAA is going to have to come to terms on how they've been treating the student athlete, and that the student athlete is a massive revenue driver for these schools. Athletic associations, athletic programs would not be able to survive without the revenue that the college football teams bring to the school, right? And I think now more than ever, with people almost, spiritually calling for these kids to play sports, right? Saying, please play football. College football is such a, it's like people are, I talk to, they're like, I can't imagine fall without college football. It's what people, once again, look their entire life to. I think now you're in the situation where, for the first time, it's almost the athletes have a bit of the upper hand for the first time. Mm-hmm. And I think that that is going to start rippling where they understand, and the country is saying play. Schools are rushing around. The NCAA is rushing around. All of this advertising revenue is baked into these massive, media networks needing to play these games. And if all of a sudden these kids said next year, you know what, we're just not playing. We're going to mobilize and not play as a union. What do the schools do? What do the media networks do? Because the media networks assume that, oh, well, we own the rights and we own these kids. It's sort of like what the NFL does. Is the NFL's like, we own these people. They're our property and they play for us and they're part of this organization. So, which is why I think everyone knew the NFL was going to take place. Because at the end of the day, you know, you would be losing multi-billions of dollars of advertising revenue for the top 4 major media, you know, companies and networks. And they just weren't going to let that sort of dent happen to their balance sheet, right? So I think now you're looking at a case where kids are understanding their value. They're looking at now, how do we form these unions? And I just think it's going to be an interesting scenario for the years to come of how schools, you know, incentivize top players to play, like Dabo said, when you could be like a Javanian Clowney, right? And say, I know I'm going to be the #1 pick. Like, why am I even playing, right? So, but I mean, Brent, what is your thought on all of this stuff too?
I think the opt-outs is the direction I would go. I'm not so sure that full cost of attendance and $30, $40, $50, $60,000 per year towards school and all the help possible, like that to me has got to still count. A scholarship guy still has to count for something.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're telling me a player can't take his girl out to a movie or out to dinner, we can have that discussion. But my understanding on full cost of attendance is that's baked in there, that's built in there. But that's a tricky road to go down. And I totally understand, Colin, as a former player, where you would come from that direction. I'm just not positive that we're going to see it mobilize into unions and things like that. Because then you're talking about, okay, well, if they decide not to play, kind of like a union, if they decide not to work, then there's no payment that day. If there's no payment, that means no scholarship that day.
Right.
And I hate to say it,
and stuff like that.
you know.
True.
I think all of the. Go ahead, Brian.
That's similar. I would say, Brent, it's really smart acknowledgement. You know, I played a short stint with the Atlanta Falcons, and during that time actually was during the CBA renegotiation. I remember they brought everyone into sort of the team room, and you know, they were talking about how we have to stay strong. You know, we need to make sure that we mobilize. We need to make sure that for the first time we're taking care of ourselves. And you know, there's too many guys on that team that said, "Yo, that's cool, but I got kids to feed." And that's why the CBA crumbled. And that's why the NFL knows that they'll never be, that they will always have the power of the athlete, because there's too many athletes who have too many different things that they worry about. And I think it's the same thing, you know, in college, you have like in you know, Division I, you have 121 schools or something like that playing. I don't see you being able to mobilize, of course, like you said, Brent, that many people. So I totally agree. It's maybe leaning more in towards, you know, how do we help these kids, you know, potentially make money? Is, you know, do we set aside trust for these kids when they walk away? Because I do know that, you know, some guys make it, some guys don't. You know, that's just like, that's you know, that's the probability there. It's the 0.1% who make it through. Everyone else, you know, you don't have the opportunity to do a summer internship. You don't have all these other opportunities to build your life outside of there. So when you do step away from the game, or you may not make it, you know, you're saying, well, you better have gotten your education. But I can tell you that a lot of schools, they don't care about these kids getting education, right? Their job is to put them in underwater basket weaving to make a C so they can play on a Saturday and make the school money. And that's just a fact, you know, and you can look across, you know, all colleges, you know, it's to make sure that their prize athletes are playing. So I think there has to be something that does incentivize these kids to say that playing this sport, you know, and being a part of this team and working for the university, which is, you know, at Alabama, that's how we saw it. We were playing for a brotherhood, you know, a fraternity that came before us. So there's a lot of heritage there, you know, so that's why you don't see guys opting out. You see guys coming there, sitting behind other people to win championships. It's a different level of just like the camaraderie and the commitment. But if you're a star athlete at, you know, and they've been good, like Kentucky or, you know, Oklahoma State or these other places, you know, you might actually sit out, right? Because you just don't see the risk reward being valuable enough.
Do you think that, Colin, I'll stick with you, if let's say we move forward, because all of the things that you guys have brought up were things that were kind of baking before COVID hit, right? So we're seeing some states like Florida and I believe California come out with laws that say that players can sell things in their likeness, right? Like autographs or maybe even some memorabilia and make some money. Would you be okay, Colin, for example, if players could make, you know, extra $10,000 a year signing autographs, but the stipulation was A, they would have to complete their degree, so they'd have to stay for 4 years, and B, they can't, and then obviously they can't opt out for a season. Do you think that that would be a fair trade?
I mean, I think that's a difficult thing, because now you're saying, like, let us own you a bit more. We'll give you the right to make money, but you don't have access to that, or you have to stay a certain amount. I think, and this is actually a conversation I was having with a friend, which is around, clearly the quarterback, the running back, the star faces of the team are going to be able to get these big signing opportunities. But, it's like, what does the offensive guard get? What does the D tackle get? What does the, unbeknown, kicker get, right? So, in my mind, I think that it's a really good step to sort of open Pandora's box, right? But I think ultimately, which is what I was leaning on, is how do you fairly compensate the kids who do play? And it's difficult, because it's like, well, does a bench warmer, have the right to make as much money as, like Mark Ingram when he was on the field with us? Like, clearly he won the Heisman. So I think it's a really unique situation where, you want to make it as fair as possible. You want to help these kids, but it's similar. I forget, like when UConn won the national championship in basketball, and I can speak to it from football as well. Like when UConn, the star point guard was like, I couldn't even afford Papa John's, to eat, because I didn't have any money. I know in football, like they sort of try to help them get a Pell Grant, and they try to help them get sort of these stipends so they can take care. But most of these guys, they don't come from good backgrounds where they have money saved up to be able to eat or to buy themselves the things that they need, almost basic necessities. And that's why you see sort of, these issues sometimes with college kids, is because it's looking for something free that they've never gotten. It's looking to take some money on the low. I was there when Andre Smith, couldn't play in the Sugar Bowl because he took $250,000 in a duffel bag, So in his mind, it was, hey, this is straight up cash, and I'm going to the NFL. I'm a top 10 pick anyway. So, who cares about this one game? Mm-hmm. And it's because you become nearsighted, short-sighted when you don't think that you're being taken care of. So I think that's one thing that we need to start thinking about, which is, is it a trust? Is it something that is commensurate with the time that you play, or the amount of length of time just on the team? And I think that can help make kids feel a little bit less stressed about what happens during their time or after. But that's just a personal opinion.
So one point you're all making is that it feels as though the players are starting to get more power, more say in what goes on, whether they have a union or not. They're starting to get more power. And so I want to transition over to the discussion on social justice. And your old coach, the Godfather, you said, Nick Saban.
Steve Spurrier?
That's
the old ball coach.
Okay.
I'll throw a laser down for that.
And we have the Mad Hatter now. But Nick Saban was in an interview on game day, college game day, and he said that there's a lot of uncertainty for players entering into this season. And he listed off COVID and the social justice issues. I want to stick with the social justice issue. And I want to start with you, Brent. What opportunities, given where players are now, do you see college athletes have to actually voice their opinions on issues like social justice that maybe the professional athletes, like the NFL players, may not have?
I would just say this. With the NFL, you're under you answer to your organization. The organization and the owner answer to the league. And so it's a little more structured. And we saw in week number 1, teams were able to decide as a team, are we going to stand in the locker room for the national anthem? Are we going to kneel for the anthem? Are we going to be out there for the Black national anthem, which they did around the league in week 1? And overall, I thought it was just well handled, regardless of what players on what teams decided to do what. I just think in the college game, there's more leeway to really, and there's never been this much leeway in the history of college football for players individually to make their mark, to step forward, to have their voice be heard. And if there's something they believe in, or something they believe for, or something they believe against, there's never been a better opportunity, because these coaches are listening. The head trainer is listening. Everybody on the staff is listening. Their fellow students are listening, and the chancellors are listening, and the leagues are listening. You saw what the Big 12 did. They came out before the season ever started and said, hey, here's our idea. We're going to have some different social justice messages that you could put on your uniforms, put on your helmets. We can put on the field as well. And so I think there's never been more opportunities for voices to be heard and for individual guys, whether they're the star on the team or not the star on the team. And I think Twitter helps with that, as much negative as there is, quite frankly, with Twitter. And that's a different, conversation for a different time. Guys are building their brands, and they have a lot of people listening and following and watching what they do. And so if there's something that they want to get out there, and clearly over this off season, I think that's one of the silver linings of COVID. No one is ever going to say 2020 has been a good year in any way, but I think everybody, regardless of if they're at the eye of the storm or if there's someone that has never been affected by social injustice or racism, everybody is forced to take pause and say, whoa, okay, do I have a blind spot here? Do I have a blind spot there? What do I think about this? What can I do here? And I think we're going to see that too. We're going to see more than just players coming out and saying, this is what I believe in. I'm going to kneel here. I'm going to put, a message on the back of my helmet. You might see guys go back to their own campuses or back to their hometowns and say, hey, let's try doing this. Let's do this. Let's make this world a better place.
Dapo, speaking on, responses to the social justice movement, you and I had a conversation earlier in the summer about the move that the University of Florida made in response to the George Floyd killing. And so for those who don't know, the University of Florida made the decision. They made several decisions, but one of them during football games was to ban the chair gator bait, which for us Gators is a very popular, crowd pleasing. If you're on the opposing side of the field, it's scary for the opposing players, right, Colin? So that's a big fear for us. And they removed it because they said that there's potentially some negative racial implications to the phrase gator bait. And they said there are some stories that in the old days, slave masters would use babies, black babies, as bait to catch gators. Unsubstantiated claims, but there could be a there. And so out of an abundance of caution, the University of Florida made the decision that they are not going to allow that chant anymore. So Dapo called me immediately and he said, Fred, what do you think about this? And, he was kind of heated. He didn't
I was fired up.
You said you didn't feel like it was the right move. You said you felt it was divisive and counterproductive. Right. So why did you say that, Dapo?
And divisive, yeah. I want to say this as a kind of a caveat. I recognize that I am such an avid Gator fan, so that I might have blinders on when it comes to something that might be more obvious to someone else. But this chant, that was, reportedly invented by a person of color, and has had no ties to any, racist connotations or actions, being removed, I thought was a knee-jerk reaction, an overreach, and, actually counterproductive in the sense that, University of Florida is in Gainesville, Florida. Once you step outside the campus, which is, very liberal, like most campuses are, you're in Alachua, Alachua, and the people there are mostly those who we're trying to convince that Black Lives Matter, and we haven't reached equality yet, and so when you remove a chant like this, and I had someone call me up and say, what does removing that chant do for social justice? How does that improve social justice? How does it raise awareness? When you have a conversation with somebody about removing the gator bait chant, does that conversation lead to, more improvement in social justice? No, the conversation is this pointless? So I feel like it was a bad decision in my opinion, and it's upsetting because that chant was, was part of the experience of going to the games. Mm-hmm. And like I said, counterproductive, because those folks who believe that this push for racial justice is derived and inspired by, like, party affiliations, are going to look at something like that and say, here's another meaningless, ploy by a certain party to affect change when there's no change to come of it. It's just another ploy to get people upset. And, it's going to harden the hearts, really, of the folks who really we would like to see come to the table.
And Dapo, when you called me, I had not thought of, I didn't look at it that way, right? So my opinion was, and we have to take ourselves back to early June. This decision was made like June 13th, right after George Floyd was killed. So the entire country was very sensitive, and there's a huge movement, and protests were happening.
Cancel culture,
right? So back then, if you're a university president and you're saying, there are allegations that this very popular cheer may be racist and it may offend some of our students, minority students, what do we do? So I can see myself as the president of the University of Florida, or any large university, making a decision, just out of caution and to be very sensitive to the thoughts of the minorities, students that we have. We're going to go ahead and eliminate it. And I even told you, Dapo, that, maybe, especially after the backlash, there's a tremendous amount of backlash, I may walk back that decision. I don't think there's anything wrong with walking back. And they still may walk back that decision. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But in that moment, and you said they made several different decisions,
Right.
Maybe they were right on 19 of them, and then they overreached on one of them. But as we know, the entire social justice movement and the whole topic is messy. It's messy on every side. And I look at the intent. The intent, I think, was the right intent. But to your point, some people on the receiving end are not going to see it that way. Colin, speaking of on the receiving end, star tight end, just kidding.
Nice transition.
I like that, Fred.
Nice transition.
Thanks. I want to just get back to talking about, from an athlete's standpoint, having a voice on the social justice issues. You spent a lot of time with players in the locker rooms. Do you think that there's a place for athletes, college football athletes, to be able to express their voices on issues like social justice reform?
Yeah, first, I think what Brent said was super poignant, and everything that he unfolded, I think that makes a ton of sense. And I'm super happy to see that happening, right? I think there's small steps that need to happen that just seem like natural next steps in the evolution of the student athlete. I think, let's take a step back and think about athletes more broadly. If you're a musician or an actor and actress, you're applauded when you're smoking weed liberally, or you're partying, or you're doing other things, right? And it almost builds the cachet of your brand, right? You're the cool guy, he's rocking the dope clothes, or he has the dope music video, or whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. If an athlete gets caught doing any of that stuff, right? Especially if you see in the NFL or in the NBA, like, they're immediately cut from the team, right? Because you're now a liability. I think, the same thing has been said when people have, wanted to build a brand maybe a little bit bigger than the NFL. You see that with those beforehand. And just quickly off the top was like a Terrell Owens or an Ocho Cinco, or even like, some people, Antonio Brown went very far with it, right? But it was, once again, it's like, let's snip you and you just become oblivious to it all, right? And it's because athletes inherently, instead of like musicians and other people, are role models for kids. I remember being a child, I couldn't wait. And we'll go back, the funny thing is, the Florida story, Marquand Manuel, number 4, star safety for the Gators, right? Yeah. Loved, I was a young kid. My dad played with Steve Spurrier at Florida, right? So when they came in for, the largest cocktail party in the world in Jacksonville, where I was born and raised, Duval, and I'd give the chant right now for Freddie T, my dad, Spurrier would say, yo, come on in and come watch the movie with us, right? And, every Friday night before the game, each team always goes and watches like an inspiring film. And I used to go sit in there and I idolize these guys. And after, I'd be like, yo, like, can I get your autograph? Years later when you're in that role, you have to take that with a lot of respect that, kids look up to you, right? And what you say really matters to them. And that's why I think it's really important right now that, and what you said, Dapo, is what I believe in as well, is that there's too much divisiveness right now. Whether it's party affiliation or just people in general, just overreacting. And I think a term that you said once, Dabo, was hardening the heart of people. Is right now, we don't need to harden the hearts of people, we need to soften it. And instead of telling rhetoric of divisiveness and how separate we are, we're not talking about how unifying we are and unifying messages that bring us together. So, sort of to go back to the question is about kids speaking, is I think that this is the moment when student athletes do need to speak, right? And I can say, like, from my position on a football team was, I was a minority. I was the small percent of it. There's not many, you look at, football, basketball, major sports, the white athlete is not heavily represented. It's actually the black athlete, right? And it's why when you saw the booing happening at the Cheers game, at the Chiefs game, all of a sudden I was like, wait, did someone just mute the TV? It was no, the NFL was very smart to silence it because they saw that this is a terrible thing that's taking place. We don't need to be booing people when athletes are trying to come together to make a stand that we are all in this together. People are humans, right? And we play a sport, but we're much more beyond that, right? We're husbands, we're family members. One of my best friends in life is a guy by the name of Mike Johnson. He was up for the Walter Payton Award. I've been back to Selma, Alabama, where if you want to talk about real racism, go to Selma, Alabama. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a couple people who've walked over that bridge a couple times to make sure that was exemplified of that moment. So for me, I think that student athletes deserve the right to stand up and speak their mind. But when they do, I just ask, or what I would hope is that it's a unifying message, right? It's not about how bad one thing is or over the other, but let's paint a picture for what the future is, right? Martin Luther King didn't talk about the terribleness of the past. He said, I have a dream. And when you paint a vision for a future, and you have kids looking up to you, that resonates. And all of a sudden, those kids start looking at their lives and the way that they treat better. And they say, well, he did that. I want to be just like him. So I'm going to do that. And I think that is how you affect culture. That's how you change culture, because as athletes, you are a role model, right? And that's something I learned at a very early age when I played. And my dad told me the responsibility, it's sort of like the Peter Parker with great power comes great responsibility, right? So you have to use it the right way. And you have to, same thing with Nick Saban is, he's like, if you go out in the community, you're not representing just yourself, you're representing this organization. And I think that as a whole, now more than ever, once again, the student athlete should come together as a team or as voices who are powerful voices within that community, to start preaching about how we all need to come together. Because once again, a lot of people, this country is, I think the Black population represents around 15 to 18% of the country, right? But on the football field, I'd say it's about 70 to 80% of it, right? Just by numbers alone. So
to that point, Colin, sorry to interrupt, but to that point, what did you learn about race growing up or in these on the football team? What did football particularly do to impact your views on race?
First and foremost, I got to give it all to my father and my mother first. It's how you're raised, right? I think, Fred, we talk about this, and we've talked about racism and things of that nature. And I say, being a racist is just a subset of being a shitty person. It's like of being a bad person. There's good people and there's bad people, right? And I date a Black woman, and we've had a lot of very difficult conversations during, what's come up. There's a lot of raw emotions that have come up, and, she's spoken about, I feel like now looking back that what that guy did was racist towards me. And I said, before you jump to that conclusion, I say, would he treat anyone? Is he just a shitty person? Is he just an asshole? Because there's assholes in this world, right? It's like you can look on the TV every day and see a lot of things and a lot of people that are bad, right? So I always say, before you jump to that accusation, look at the person's character, because that's just a character flaw. And that teaches you who not to hang out with and who to. I think a lot of people have seen a lot of different colors of people during this time. You know, I've spoken to friends like, whoa, I didn't know that's who he was until this happened. So I tell people, it's like, it's better to know who people are than not to know who people are, right? So, but growing up, you know, I played sports my entire life, you know, and playing top AAU basketball or playing top football, I was always, you know, a minority of that group. And I don't think, you know, a lot of white people have ever experienced that. I think it's, you know, and when you do experience that and you know, and you're in these world, you realize more times than not, which is what most people should, is that we're just human beings, you know? And part of being on a team is, and you don't get this because I know I've had people say, you know, I've had 10 surgeries from playing sports. You know, that's originally why I walked away from the NFL, was I just I didn't want to take the beating anymore. Was, you know, would you let your son play again? You know, would you let your kid play football? And my response was, you could probably make more guaranteed money playing basketball or, you know, European soccer, but there's no type of life experience that you get when you have 100 different guys of different backgrounds in a locker room, and everyone comes together as a family, right? And when you leave those circles, you know, my dad told me this when I was playing the game, and, you know, and I'll definitely tell you, it's the one thing that I miss is the eyes of my brothers in the huddle. And that wasn't because of the skin tone of someone. That's because those were my brothers. So, you know, for me, I think that that if we are siloing each other in these places on social media, if we're siloing each other in just our friend groups because we're afraid to hang out with people from different backgrounds or from different ethnicities, whether that's Black or Muslim or Hispanic, whatever, you are not becoming a full-colored person, in the sense that you're not actually being able to be as rich of a character as you should, because it's like anything in life, wisdom is gained through experience. And if you don't have various perspectives, then you're just looking one way. You don't have a 360 view. So I know I've talked a lot, but I think it's something that's extremely valuable within the fabric of sports today. It's how it unites people. And I just hope that the people who are playing the game today are able to emphasize that message, and that it's allowed to, and their voices are allowed to unite this country, which I think it desperately needs right now.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Colin. I think one of the things for sure is because 2020 is so different, and because we've had so much taken away from us, we've realized what the value of college football is. And to your point on the players, I think even players, listening to what players have written in favor of having a season, it's that camaraderie that I've read about, that seeing your brother's eyes across the huddle that they miss. And they also just work extremely hard throughout the year to play just a handful of games, right? So to take that away, I mean, that extends to all of our lives. We've had things taken away, and so we can appreciate it. And so I wanted to wrap up with one final question for you guys. And this has been an amazing discussion, but what have we learned in 2020, given everything that's happened? And it's not even over yet, so who knows what's going to happen coming up. But what have we learned in 2020 about college football in particular, and maybe even sports in general, that we're going to continue to remember moving forward? And I'll start with you, Brent.
I would just say this, and it's not just, I mean, so much of, like, Fred, you and I have been connected on CBS and Florida football, like, for the entire time I've known you. And, like, I guess we don't need that. We would find something, but there is just something about sports, and in particular, because I'm so close to it, college football. Like, we need it to happen. It's a necessary thing that kind of takes our minds off of any stresses or any, overly serious things. Obviously, it's right now politically, and it's a tough climate right now with COVID and politics and everything that's going on. And college football is just such a welcome distraction. And there's nothing like the pageantry and the fans. And I know it's being watered down a little bit this year, but just the fact that we find out today that the Big Ten is going to have a season, and the SEC is going to get started, not this weekend, but the next. And even though there's going to be some potholes along the way, and there's going to be games that get canceled and games that get moved and games that don't get played and players that opt out and players that unfortunately, have to sit out because of COVID for a game or two. I mean, college football unites people like nothing else. And I'm talking, it unites people when they're across the aisles, Auburn fans with Alabama fans, when you can respectfully hate each other.
Yep.
I mean, it's just, there's nothing like it. And a conversation like this that has gone way deeper than most sports conversations, it doesn't happen without college football, right? That was the impetus, Fred, behind you getting all of us together for this discussion. And look at what we're able to hit in terms of topics based on that.
So true.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brent. And Dapo, what is the big takeaway from 2020?
With regards to 2020 in college football, for sure, if I could sum it up in a few words, it would be go to the game. Definitely take for granted. I take for granted the last time we got together. I'm fearful of when the next time we might get together next might be. But what I can promise to you is that I'll be there.
Okay.
And it's, right now I realize how much I probably took for granted in the past, the weekend in Gainesville. 2020 certainly taught me that with the pandemic and everything else going on. So if an opportunity presents itself, I'll be there, and I hope we can get back to that soon.
That's good. And I'll be at Florida, Georgia, so I'll go ahead and extend that invitation now.
That's all right.
22 years in a row.
If a guy like Dapo thought he was taking it for granted, then there's no fan out there that wasn't taking it for granted.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I think Dapo's holding back on how much of a fan he is. If you guys knew how into it, I mean, anyway. I've been to games where I've had to calm. You usually don't want to calm a fan down in the middle of the game, but I mean, Dapo is running up side to side in the stands and everything. He's good. He's good for the game. And Colin, what is your big takeaway so far from 2020 as it relates to college football?
I think Brent hit on a ton of great things there. And to keep it short, I think people underestimate that college football is a piece of the fabric of our society. And I think for the first time when college football was ripped away, it was the eye-opening for a lot of people that, wait, something isn't right here, And I think, that's a powerful feeling when something that you're so used to is taken away and you lose it. Like, the avid in Dapo is not to have that. It leaves a hole in you. And I think it helps to create change. So, for me, it's college football, and I speak to it. It's like, why do people care so much about college football? It's like, because no one went to Pittsburgh Steelers University, right? No one went to, no one went to Cincinnati, Cleveland Browns University. You have an alma mater, and there's part of that brings back nostalgia for a wonderful time in your life, whether that's a period of youth or best friends or, the ignorance is bliss of life, right? So I think that football and sports, being a part of it symbolizes so much more than what that is. I think it teaches, when you get to play it, life values, hard work, dedication, all those intangibles they try to sell you on, right? But I think more than ever, college football is something that touches all Americans. And if college football can touch you in that way, then hopefully it can change you for the better.
Thank you, Colin. Listen, guys, this has been an amazing conversation. I want to thank you guys for taking the time out to just share your views on the upcoming season. I hope we could do this again. You guys have been great. I hope your respective teams have great seasons. And I look forward to continuing this discussion. It's been a nice, we've been talking race up until this point. And so for us to kind of pivot now and talk about college football, another thing that's important to me and a lot of our audience, I think has been a great discussion. So I want to thank you guys again, and we'll see you later at the end of 2020.
All right, go Gators.
Thank you so much. And hey, and once Alabama wins another national championship, I think that's going to be 17 maybe on the helmet now. I think we all come back at the end of the season and do this again and see how it all went down.
And here I am, Fred. I'm Kansas State, and we just got beat by Arkansas State in our next game of the season.
I was going to say, Fred, very strategic to not invite any of your Florida State friends on. Let them remain silent.
Yeah, I threw them a bone by not bringing them on. Brent, you can always come over here to the bright side, or you can go over to Alabama. You can pick one. Right. But you have to stay impartial because you have that show, though, Brent.
Definitely, yeah. I promise.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Join the Convo. You know, after spending the first 3 episodes of the show discussing race in America, I figured we'd pivot a little bit and discuss some of the other events impacting our lives today. And that's what we'll continue to do on this show. We will discuss what matters to you. And as you know, we have a big election coming up, so expect upcoming episodes to discuss a whole range of topics around the election, like faith in politics and the mindset of voters on both sides. I can't wait to dig into it with you guys. To stay connected with us, follow us on Instagram at Join the Convo Co. We definitely want to hear feedback and we want to get your input as we continue to create episodes. And also, I'd really appreciate it, no matter what platform you're on. If you enjoyed this episode, give us a like, subscribe, and maybe even leave a positive comment if you really, really enjoyed the episode. It helps us move up the rankings as a new podcast. Guys, thanks again for joining. I'll see you on the next episode. Take care.